The go-to person for battery metals at McKinsey is this guy. It's Ken Hoffman. Ken, welcome back to Kitco.
Thanks for having me back, Michael.
Ken, it's been too long. Let's do a year in review, a recap. 2021 was the year that battery metals arrived. Choose your top event or most significant milestone in the space, Ken.
Well, I think 2021 put to rest, are we going to have EVs in the future? Sales more than doubled to, final numbers are still coming in. More than 6 million EVs were sold globally. In many countries around the world, EVs represented 20, 30, 40% of all vehicles sold. The models are getting better and better, and so fully expect that somewhere in the future you will own an electric vehicle and you will be quite excited to buy these electric vehicles. The question is, do we have enough materials and how fast can we grow to get from here to there?
I always think the top event was really the investments that the major automobile makers made. It really showed that they were serious about this, but I guess you just see the shifting consumer sentiment, Ken.
It is quite amazing, when 3-4 years ago, you would have big oil companies and big automotive companies sort of invite us in and we would tell them where we thought things were going and they politely nod their head. And now all of a sudden, those same companies were the ones who came out with the big investments. And I think the change came from the product. When you see a vehicle that can give you, the types of ranges that these new vehicles, 5, 6, 7, 800-kilometer range. I've seen a number of new technologies. You can charge them in the same amount of time you can get petrol. No oil changes, nothing to fix. These things go for a long, long, long time. I mean, they are a better vehicle at the end of the day. The question is, how soon do we go from, I call internal combustion engines inferior, to a superior technology, which is the EV technology. And I think that's what you saw the final realization by auto companies here, who were seeing other companies get the jump on them, starting in China, then moving to Europe, and now in North America.
We need to mention Russia. Everybody mentions oil and gas, but the country is a big deal for battery metals too, Ken.
It is particularly nickel. It has really very little to do with the other metals, lithium in particular. But nickel, it is quite large. It's around 9% of total nickel supply. But the important battery material, what we call class 1 nickel, and nickel that really has no iron in it whatsoever, it's about 22, 23% of world supply. So it is quite significant. And so we already had a lot of angst over the past couple of years about nickel, particularly because the only growth is coming from Indonesia. But now going forward, this is just one more worry in our worry list for battery materials. And make no mistake, while there are other battery chemistries out there, the one that uses nickel is going to give you what most consumers want, that range and that recharge time.
Now, you've been mentioning the tight supply of battery metals, Ken. You have some optimism around lithium, though?
I do. Now, the price of lithium has gone, it hasn't gone to the moon. It's gone to Saturn. It's gone to Mars. It's way out there. The price of lithium, consider this, 2 years ago was around $8,000 to $10,000 a metric ton. Today, the price is between $75,000 and $80,000 a metric ton, and that adds significantly. It adds $3,000 to $5,000 to the cost of a vehicle if you were to buy at the current spot price. Now, two things. One good thing was a lot of auto companies locked in their lithium price before the year began, and so you're not going to see that price increase. And secondarily, you're going to see two things happen. One, there was a lot of money flocking into the lithium industry right now for new supply to come on. And secondarily, I think what's really important is you see some new technologies coming on the market that are really exciting, that will do a number of things. They'll increase production capacity, they'll drop the cost of production, and then they'll also they'll be better for the environment. And I think one of the things we've seen a lot with the mining industry is in general is a lot of reticence for local communities to want mines built. These new technologies should have such a small footprint, we hope, that communities will, once they understand what they are, will welcome them into their communities.
Speaking about that bullishness, Ken, that we saw in 2021, I get the real sense that Australia has probably been the most bullish. We saw the BHP Wyloo fight for Noront, certainly the IGO Western Areas acquisition. Is Australia just more bullish on the battery metal sector than compared to North America?
I think they started a bit earlier, seeing what was going on in China. I think Australia had a front row seat to this, and also seeing the major investments that China was willing to make into Australia got the ball rolling probably quicker than what we saw otherwise. And so I think that was what got the ball rolling. And now all of a sudden you're starting to see that bullishness enter into North America, but late. But again, remember the EV stuff started in China 4 or 5 years ago. It really spread to Europe. Not only starting, the first cells in Europe was really only made, towards the end of last year. If we look at certain companies over there like Northvolt, and then the U.S., we're still building our facilities here, other than Panasonic and for Tesla. And remember, they're getting all their material from Asia. So I think now that we're starting to see some excitement here, and talking to a lot of our clients, it's been there. You're just going to start hearing about it pretty soon.
I've been talking to some Canadian nickel projects that they're advancing. They've flagged a concern about midstream capacity. If we start mining nickel in North America, are we going to be able to process it, Ken?
No, we won't be able to. It is a huge problem for the industry.
Yeah.
It's our number one request when we hear from governments that they're very interested in moving forward with the battery industry. And it is pretty, it's not a very sexy industry, the refining of the materials, and it's a very expensive industry to refine materials. So I think one of two things has to happen. Either governments really need to step up to the plate to make sure that once the material is mined, and we think there's several 100,000 metric tons of nickel that could be produced and added to the market, but aren't brought on because of refining assets. And the other part is a lot of mines are sitting there and they won't be developed. They can't get funding because they need to tell their investors, okay, who is going to refine this material? So that's sort of the problem that we have.
Why do we need a government solution on it, Ken?
I think because for most companies, this could be for major refining facilities, several $billions. And I think for a lot of the mining companies, they're really afraid to put that type of capital down today because they're sort of saying, well, wait a minute, the battery technologies are constantly changing. What if I, take the 5 or 6 or 7 years to build these facilities, and then all of a sudden that material is no longer needed because technology has moved on. So I think either you're going to see governments having to put money into this space now, or hopefully maybe there's some new technologies that come onto the market that could be quicker and less costly that people are willing to invest in. Lastly, those materials are going to be processed where they normally are, either in current, very old and aging facilities in North America. Maybe we'll see a little brownfield action there, or what all the politicians say they don't want is the material will be sent to Asia to be processed there and then sent back.
Uh, let's talk about people that are really unsure about what to invest in. I hear it often when I'm talking to people that are investing into the space. They just worry about substitution. They hear about all the chemistry. They just kind of throw out their hands and they say, I'm just going to invest in copper.
Copper isn't a bad place to be. I'll always clear up the misnomer. There's not 4 times as much copper in an EV. It's about 20 or 30% more in the latest models, but it still is an important model. And to do that fast charging we talked about, that's going to need a heck of a lot of copper. But I think, the one thing we do know is at least for the next 5 to 7 years, nickel is going to be in great demand. I think there's other metals that are coming on the fore that will be really interesting. So for example, if nickel's a problem, we're going to move to manganese. And in order for manganese to work, you need to coat that with niobium. So there's a lot of different metals here that will come to the fore. We aren't even mentioning stationary storage and metals like vanadium. There will be not one battery. And we always get to, the question, what's the one battery that's going to be, the Tesla killer or something like that? It's not going to be that. There's going to be probably 15 or 20 different battery chemistries. Just know that we are going to this renewable future and that many of these metals will have a long-term solution and they'll come to fore. It's not going to be that single, solid bullet, except for maybe lithium, which does seem to be in every single battery chemistry that I've been aware of.
Heading towards that future, Ken, it seems there's a lot of government regulations that are coming down, just requiring recycling and then just requiring clean sources, never mind that companies are trying to meet net zero emissions. I get the feeling there's going to be a world where you're going to have green source battery and non-green sourced batteries, Ken.
It's true. I mean, let's not live under the fantasy that recycling can really help us out too much for quite some time. Just look about it this way. The EV batteries last about a decade. A decade ago, there was about 40 to 50,000 vehicles sold. So you're making 6 million vehicles out of 40 to 50,000. The math just doesn't work. Long term, I think, number one, you are going to see recycling become part of the solution. We do need to learn how to recycle a battery. There's no commercial battery recycling on the face of the planet that can do all of the battery. You can do the cathode active material. What about the separator? What about the electrolytes? What about the graphite? What about all the other different parts of the battery? Very few people, when they talk about we can recycle a battery, do the battery in its entirety. I have seen some pretty neat technologies that may come to fore that will do that. But I do think you're going to see, as you said, you're going to probably have government regulations that say you need to put 10 or 20% of that new battery to be virgin material, to be recycled material, and then the rest can be virgin. But I think that day is coming.
Now, finally, Ken, you go a long way back with Kitco, and we always appreciate having you on. You used to help us out with precious metals before you specialized in EVs. Any parting thoughts on gold? Of course, the metal hit a 20-month high on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and interestingly, Bitcoin tanked.
That was really interesting. I did notice the one morning where gold was up $30, $40 and Bitcoin was really falling apart. Gold has always had a historical sense, and it exists, and it is tangible, and it is something that is globally recognized. And so I think gold will always have a place in the world monetary system. It is the only thing universally held by central banks around the world, and it does have a store of value. And so I've always been a big believer in gold, and I continue to be a big believer in gold. And I think these markets are proving why gold is such an important part of an investment portfolio.
Ken, we love your range.
Thank you very much, Michael.
He's Ken Hoffman. He's senior expert at McKinsey. My name is Michael McRae, and you're watching Kitco Mining.